Something breaks open when it happens, not metaphorically, structurally, something in the interior architecture of who you are, the arrangement you've spent years constructing quietly without anyone watching, shifts, and it shifts without your permission. Before you've decided anything, before you've made a single conscious choice about this person, or this moment, or what it means. That's what nobody prepares you for. Not the warmth, not the recognition, the breakage. The way bonding, real bonding, the kind that leaves a mark, is not an addition to your existing self, but a reorganization of it. Something that was arranged one way is now arranged differently, and you didn't authorize it. You didn't even see it coming. You were just in a room with someone, or on the phone, or 3 hours into something that had no reason to go as deep as it went. And now you are not the same configuration you were before. Jung called the psyche a living system, not a container, not a file cabinet, a system, something with its own intelligence, its own directionality, its own capacity to be affected and to affect in return. And living systems, when they come into genuine contact with each other, don't stay the same. That's not a flaw in the design. That's the design. The question worth asking, the one that almost never gets asked, is not what bonding feels like. You already know what it feels like. The question is what it actually does. Inside the parts of you that don't report back through language. Inside the parts operating below the surface of every relationship you've ever thought you understood. There's something women carry into bonding that doesn't have a clean name yet. It's a kind of porousness, a capacity, sometimes chosen, often not, to take in what another person is carrying without the other person handing it over deliberately. To feel the shape of someone's interior before they've told you anything about it. To know the quality of their anxiety or their grief or their wanting before the conversation has moved anywhere near that territory. This isn't intuition in the soft, decorative sense. It's not a gift. It's a perceptual system, one that was trained, in most cases early, by necessity, by relational labor performed before there was language for it, by the specific developmental pressure of having to read other people's emotional states before you'd finished forming your own. And it means that bonding, for most women, is never quite the clean bilateral exchange it appears to be. It's messier, more porous, more expensive. You don't just connect with another person, you absorb something of them. And they leave residue, not in a metaphorical sense, in the sense that something of their psychological material genuinely enters your system and changes what's moving there. You've felt this. The version where you come home from being with someone you care about, someone where something real is present, and you don't know if what you're feeling is yours. There's a sadness that doesn't match your Tuesday, a restlessness that arrived with them, a longing that is either yours or theirs, or somehow both at once, and the borders have dissolved in a way that should be disorienting, but mostly just feels like the cost of caring. Most frameworks for relationships don't address this directly. They talk about communication, about compatibility, about shared values and attachment styles and love languages, and the endless vocabulary of modern relational psychology, all of it useful. None of it quite accounting for the basic fact that when two people bond, something moves between them that is not named in any of those frameworks. Jung addressed it, obliquely, rigorously, with the particular bluntness of someone who had spent decades watching what the psyche actually does when no one is managing it carefully. He said the unconscious communicates directly, not through words, not through behavior, exactly. Through a kind of transmission that happens in the field between two people, in the space created by genuine contact, that bypasses the conscious mind entirely and speaks directly to the unconscious of the other. That transmission is what bonding is made of, at its core, before the conversation, before the history, before anything you can point to and say, this is what happened between us. Jung had a term for the specific quality of connection he was tracking. He borrowed it from an anthropologist named Lucien Lévy-Bruhl, who used it to describe a state observed in certain cultural practices, a condition in which the self and the world, the self and the other, are not yet separated into distinct entities. A condition of original participation before the hard lines of individuation have been drawn. He called it participation mystique, and he meant something precise by it, not mystical in the supernatural sense. Mystical in the original sense, hidden, interior, not yet available to the light of conscious observation. A state in which the boundary between self and other becomes genuinely permeable, not imagined as permeable, not experienced as permeable because you're sensitive or empathic or spiritually inclined. Actually, structurally, psychologically permeable in a way that changes the nature of what each person can know about themselves and about the other. Participation mystique is not rare. It is not a peak state that happens only in extraordinary relationships. It is the baseline condition of genuine bonding. It is what connection is, before the ego steps in to organize it into a narrative and give each person their separate role, and draw the borders back in and say, this is me, this is you, this is what passed between us, and now I understand it. Before that organizing happens, in the actual moment of real contact, participation mystique is occurring. The unconscious systems of two people are in direct communication. The contents are moving, the borders are provisional, and what each person is experiencing is not cleanly separable from what the other is experiencing. This is why certain people exhaust you in ways that have nothing to do with the content of the interaction. You left the conversation with nothing taxing said, nothing demanded, nothing even particularly difficult, and yet you're depleted in a way that sleep will help, but not fully resolve. Your unconscious was working the entire time, reading, processing, managing what was coming through the field. The depletion is real because the work was real, even though it was invisible. And this is equally why certain people restore you, not because they said the right things, not because the conversation was productive or nourishing in any obvious way, because the field created by your two unconscious systems in contact, the particular resonance of that specific encounter, gave your psyche something it needed that it could not manufacture on its own. That is the psychological architecture of bonding. Not warmth as a pleasant feeling, warmth as an actual transfer of something between two unconscious systems in genuine contact. Here is the part that is genuinely difficult to sit with. The connections that feel most like recognition, the ones where you suddenly feel more yourself, more real, more fully inhabited than you did an hour ago. Those are not always what they appear to be. Sometimes what feels like recognition is projection, not projection in the loose accusatory sense, the sense where someone is accused of projecting their problems onto another person. Projection in the precise Jungian sense, the unconscious process by which the psyche deposits its own contents onto an external figure. Qualities, energies, capacities, images, things that exist in the interior but have not yet been consciously claimed, are placed onto another person and then experienced as belonging to that person. When you bond with someone and feel as though you've finally been seen, as though this person understands something about you that you've never successfully communicated before, as though in their presence you become a version of yourself that was previously inaccessible. That feeling is real. The activation it describes is real, but the source of the activation may not be located where it feels like it's located. The source may be you. What the other person provided was the frequency, the particular shape of their unconscious, that activated material in yours which had been dormant, waiting, organizing itself in the dark for years, possibly. waiting for the precise external condition that would allow it to become conscious. And when that condition arrived in the form of this person, the material flooded the system. And it felt like recognition because it was recognition. But the recognition was of something in yourself, not of something in them. This is not a cynical framing. Jung was not cynical about it. He didn't see projection as error or distortion. He saw it as the mechanism through which the unconscious makes contact with its own contents via the external world. You cannot simply decide to become aware of what you carry in the unconscious. The unconscious doesn't respond to direct command. It responds to resonance. It deposits its contents onto figures in the world that have the right shape to hold them, and then, if the work of individuation is happening, those contents can be recognized as belonging to the interior and gradually reclaimed. The projection is not the lie. The lie is staying in the projection without asking what it's showing you about yourself. But here's what makes this genuinely hard. Projected connections feel more real than non-projected ones, at least initially. Because the projection is perfect. It has been constructed by the unconscious specifically for you, assembled from your deepest needs, your most unintegrated qualities, your most persistent longings. It fits you perfectly because it is you, essentially. Your own unrealized self, deposited onto the person in front of you and encountered as though it exists entirely in them. The actual person has limitations, has contradictions, has a specific relationship to their own fear that doesn't align with the image, has bad mornings and unclear boundaries, and a personality that diverges in important ways from what the projection needed it to be. The projection has none of those inconveniences. The projection is available to be precisely what it needs to be, and so the most intoxicating early bonds are often the most heavily projected, which doesn't make them meaningless, which doesn't mean nothing real was present. It means the relationship was doing double work from the start. The work between two actual people and the work between you and your own interior that was using the encounter as a vehicle. Jung spent a significant portion of his later work on the question of what happens when two unconscious systems meet in genuine encounter. He returned to alchemical symbolism for a reason, not because he was interested in alchemy as a literal practice, but because he recognized in its imagery a precise and detailed map of psychological processes that had no other adequate vocabulary. The alchemists called it the conjunctio, the union, not a blending, not a compromise, a genuine union between two opposing principles, the kind that produces something that was not possible from either element alone. Something third, something that exists in neither party individually, but becomes available in the encounter between them. The alchemical imagery was explicit. The union was sometimes violent. The original forms had to be dissolved. Something had to die in each element for the third thing to emerge. Jung believed that deep human bonding participates in this same structure, that what happens when two people meet at genuine depth is not the addition of two personalities. It is the encounter of two unconscious systems, each carrying its own internal opposites, each carrying its own unrealized potential, each structured in a specific way that interacts with the specific structure of the other to produce conditions that neither could have produced alone. This is why the deepest bonds feel like they give you access to parts of yourself that didn't exist before. Not because they were created by the encounter, they were not, but because the field created by two unconscious systems in genuine contact has a generative capacity. Something is possible in that field that is not possible inside either person in isolation. The encounter creates conditions, and what becomes possible in those conditions is real. There is also, and this is the part that gets almost no attention, an archetypal dimension to bonding that operates entirely underneath the personal. underneath the history of these two specific people, underneath the particular dynamic of this specific relationship, when a woman bonds with another person at depth, she is not only connecting with a man or a woman or a friend or a lover in the biographical sense, she is activating in herself and potentially in the other such archetypal patterns that are older than either of them. Patterns that the psyche carries not as personal memory, but as structural inheritance. The mother, the child, the beloved, the adversary, the stranger who turns out to be essential. These patterns don't need to be consciously recognized to be active. They operate whether you know their names or not. The woman who finds herself responding to a new bond with an intensity that seems disproportionate to the biographical facts, the length of the relationship, the amount of shared history, is often feeling the activation of an archetypal layer beneath the personal one. The bond is tapping something older than either person. This doesn't make the connection less real. It makes it more complex, more layered, more genuinely significant than the surface story of two people meeting and finding each other interesting. The archetypal layer is always in motion in bonding. The question is whether you're aware enough of it to work with it consciously, or whether it works you from below without your knowledge. Here is something that almost never gets said in the ways people talk about connection and bonding and what it means to be genuinely close to someone. The other person becomes part of your psychic structure, not a memory of them, not a representation, an actual internalized presence that takes up residence in the unconscious and continues from there to operate, to speak, to function as a psychological entity that is neither fully them nor fully you, but something generated by the bond that persists long after the external relationship has changed or ended or moved into a different form. Jung called this the internalized other. He was describing something clinical, something he observed in his patients' dream work and their unconscious material. But the phenomenon is not clinical in the sense of being pathological. It is simply how the psyche works. It doesn't merely record significant others as memories. It incorporates them, takes them in, makes them part of its ongoing internal population. You've experienced this. The person you've been having imaginary conversations with since the real conversation ended. The person whose opinion you find yourself internally consulting years after the relationship itself has concluded. The person who appears in your dreams, not quite as themselves, as something that wears their face, but seems to mean something else, something larger, something your unconscious is still working through. That's not failure to let go. That's not pathological attachment. That's the psychic reality of what genuine bonding actually does. It restructures the interior, slightly or significantly depending on the depth of the contact, but always to some degree. You do not emerge from a real bond unchanged, and the restructuring doesn't reverse when the relationship changes. What's almost never addressed in any framework for understanding loss or endings is this: the internalized other continues to develop inside you after the external relationship has stopped. The version of the person that your psyche has absorbed is not frozen at the moment of departure. It keeps moving, it keeps speaking, it keeps evolving in relationship to everything else your unconscious is processing, encountering new material from new experiences and finding new angles on what that old bond deposited in you. This is why it's possible to feel years after a relationship has ended, years after you've processed the grief, done the work, moved into a genuinely different chapter of your life, that something in that old material has shifted. Not because you haven't healed, because the interior is still metabolizing, still finding what it needs to find in what was left behind. The bonds that mattered do not end in you when they end in the world. That is not a wound. It is the architecture of psychic life. It is the cost and the gift of having been in genuine contact with another human being's unconscious, which leaves something always that the conscious narrative of the relationship's beginning and middle and end cannot fully account for. There is a version of this conversation that moves very quickly to the question of what to do, how to bond more consciously, how to avoid projection, how to integrate the internalized other in a healthy way, how to navigate the dissolution that genuine contact produces and come out on the other side with something useful. That version is not wrong, but it misses something important. The psyche does not primarily respond to instruction. It responds to attention. What Jung's framework points toward, in all its architectural complexity, across all the decades of his clinical observation and theoretical development, is not a set of techniques for managing the psychological experience of bonding. It is an invitation to pay a different quality of attention to what is actually happening, to stop organizing the experience so quickly into something legible and start sitting with what is actually moving before the ego imposes its preferred narrative. The dissolution that accompanies real bonding, the confusion of not knowing whose feelings you're carrying, the disorientation of feeling more alive and less stable at the same time, the sense of being opened in a way that hasn't fully resolved yet. That is not a problem to solve efficiently. That is the process doing its work. The conjunctio, as the alchemists knew, involves dissolution before it involves anything else. The nigredo, the blackening, the stage in which the original material has broken down and not yet reorganized into anything recognizable. It looks like confusion from the inside. It looks sometimes like something went wrong. Like the connection that seemed so significant has left you worse off than you were before. Less stable, less clear, less capable of your ordinary functioning. Jung was honest about this period in a way that most frameworks are not. He went through it himself after the break with Freud. Years of dissolution, of professional and personal disorientation, of sitting in the dark with material that had been cracked open by the rupture of that profound bond and had not yet reorganized into anything useful. He documented it privately in what eventually became the Red Book. What he learned from that period, what the whole second half of his life's work emerged from, was that the dissolution is not the failure of the process. It is the middle of it, the necessary middle, the stage without which the third thing cannot emerge. For women navigating the aftermath of significant bonding, the bond that changed something, that left residue, that activated material which has not yet been fully integrated. The Jungian framework offers something that most other frameworks do not. It offers a way to understand the confusion and the intensity and the ongoing reverberations of genuine contact, not as symptoms of something gone wrong, but as evidence of something real happening, something that the psyche is metabolizing, something that is, in its own unglamorous and non-linear way, doing exactly what it is supposed to do. The only question, and it is not a small question, is whether you're bringing enough conscious attention to the process to participate in it, rather than simply being carried by it. Active imagination. The willingness to turn toward the material that the bond activated, the internalized presence, the projected contents, the qualities that became accessible in the encounter and have not yet been fully claimed, and ask in genuine openness, without knowing in advance what the answer will be, what is this showing me about what I have not yet become? That question is different from, what does this relationship mean? It is different from, why do I still feel this? It is different from every version of the question that keeps the focus on the other person or on the external story of the connection. It asks about you, about what the encounter deposited in your interior that was not there or was not accessible before, about what the activation revealed that you are now responsible for, Not because the other person handed you a gift, because the encounter created conditions for something to emerge that was always yours and was waiting for precisely the frequency of that contact to become available. The bond was the catalyst, the material is yours, and the work, the real work, is what you do with it now that you have it. Jung wrote late in his life that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. He didn't say one. He didn't specify the more sensitive one, or the more conscious one, or the one who felt it more. Both. That is a serious claim. It means you are not only being shaped by the people who have come into genuine contact with you, you are shaping them. Your unconscious is transmitting into their field. Your particular psychological structure is activating material in them, making available things that wouldn't have been available without the specific frequency of your presence. You are not a passive surface on which other people's psyches leave marks. You are also leaving marks. The connections that have stayed with you, the ones you're still metabolizing, the ones that cracked something open or closed something down or made available a version of yourself you hadn't previously had access to, they were real. Not in the sense that the relationship became what you hoped, not in the sense that the other person registered the encounter with the weight it had for you, but in the sense that something actually occurred, something transferred. Something in your psychic structure reorganized in response to genuine contact. Your feeling of significance was not wrong. It was your unconscious accurately reporting that the field created by that encounter carried something. For you, for your process, for the long, unglamorous, structurally invisible work of becoming what you actually are, rather than what circumstances shaped you to perform being. The encounter is over. The activation isn't. What you're doing with what it left, that's the only question that has any weight now.